good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm going to wait just for a minute for people to be able to tune in here. Well, it's good to be with you all for another midweek Bible reflection. This week I'm going to be reflecting on Romans chapter 14, verses 1 through 12. So feel free to turn there with me in your Bibles if you would like to. You'll have some time as I'm doing my little introduction here. It's Romans chapter 14, verses 1 through 12. Anyways, it was my birthday this past week, and I really did enjoy some time with some good friends who came up, and we went to some local places. There's a really awesome restaurant in Newark that had some wonderful outdoor seating called Homegrown that serves a lot of fresh local food. They have a lot of really great vegetable dishes and just healthy stuff, and that's my kind of food. So we went there, which was awesome. And then afterwards, the University of Delaware actually has their own dairy, and they have a ice cream shop called U Dairy, and they have amazing flavors there and they make it all in-house. And so we had some really great ice cream. And then we went to Milburn's Orchards and got some apples, and I think it's the Golden Honey apples is their one of their varieties that they produce. It was amazing apples. I also got some peaches and some other good stuff there too. So we had a great day for my birthday. It was really fun. Good local stuff. It's nice, being new to Elkton and to the church here and to the community, to learn about all the local businesses and to support them and everything. I really enjoy that. But anyways, I'm happy to get to reflect with you on a unique Bible passage today that might require a little bit of explaining. I kind of like these passages. They're just so interesting to me. But we are going to be wading back into the book of Romans once again to explore more deeply the issue of legalism. So a primary issue that the church was dealing with at this time was legalism. And Paul is addressing that here in his letter to the church in Rome. And so let's dive in to Romans chapter 14, verses 1 through 12. I'm going to go ahead and read that passage. Welcome those who are weak in faith, but not for the purpose of quarreling over opinions. Some believe in eating anything, while the weak eat only vegetables. Those who eat must not despise those who abstain, and those who abstain must not pass judgment on those who eat, for God has welcomed them. Who are you to pass judgment on servants of another? It is therefore their own Lord that they stand or fall, and they will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make them stand. Some judge one day to be better than another, while others judge all days to be alike. Let all be fully convinced in their own minds. Those who observe the day observe it in honor of the Lord. Also those who eat in honor of the Lord, since they give thanks to God, while those who abstain in honor of the Lord and give thanks to God. I know, it's confusing. Just bear with me. We do not live to ourselves, and we do not die to ourselves. If we live to the Lord. And if we die to the Lord. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. For to this end, Christ died and lived again, so that he might be Lord of both the dead and the living. Why do you pass judgment on your brother or sister? Or why do you despise your brother or sister? For we all will stand before the Lord in the seat of judgment. For it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall give praise to God. So then, each of us will be accountable to God, Christ, and make no provisions for the flesh to gratify its desires. Well, that passage needs some explaining. As I said, it's really interesting. You have Paul says things like, there in verse 2, some believe in eating anything, while the weak eat only vegetables. What's Paul doing with that passage? Is he saying that vegetarians are weak? Is he dissing them? No, he's not. Remember, spinach makes you strong like Popeye, right? So Paul is dealing with a very important division that's arising in the life of the church. You have Jews and Gentiles who are both becoming Christians. So basically you have people who have been following these pagan religions, all different varieties of religions, the Gentiles, and then you have the Jewish Christians as well, who have been following Judaism all of their lives, and they're both converting to Christianity, and they have very different religious backgrounds. We'll just say that very plain. They are completely opposite of the spectrum from one another when it comes to how they practice religion. And so this is causing a lot of divisions because, culturally and religiously, these people are very different from one another. Very, very different. And questions are arising, like whether or not the Gentiles need to also practice the Jewish Old Testament faith. Do Jews have to follow the Old Testament and the laws of the Old Testament? Do Gentiles need to follow all that strict legalistic stuff that can be found in books like Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy? For example, shellfish, according to the Jewish law and Old Testament, are not to be eaten. Like if you read the Old Testament, the Old Testament tells the Jewish people not to eat shellfish. Leviticus 11:9-12 says, of all the marine animals, these are ones you may use for food. You may eat anything from the water if it has both fins and scales, whether taken from salt water or from streams. But you must never eat animals from the sea or from rivers that do not have both fins and scales. They are detestable to you. This applies both to little creatures that live in shallow water and to all creatures that live in deep water. They will always be detestable to you. You must never eat their meat or even touch their dead bodies. Any marine animal that does not have both fins and scales is detestable to you. That's Leviticus 11:9-12. No crabs, no shrimp, no lobster, no oysters, no clams, no mussels. Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to fly out here on the eastern shore of Maryland. Now imagine we're living back in the time of the early church, and some folks from out of town, they come here and they start spouting off these Bible verses and saying, but God says it right here in the Bible, in the book of Leviticus. Those of you who love your seafood, you're not going to give up your crabs like that, are you? You're going to have some problems with those ideas, aren't you? Well, that's what's happening in the life of the church, too. You have this clash of cultures and religions between Judaism and paganism. And now, of course, there were really good reasons for these laws back in the day. These, for example, laws against shellfish were there because without proper food sanitization and cooking methods, people could get really serious illnesses from shellfish. But today we have proper processing and cooking methods that make eating shellfish much safer. But there's a few other really fun examples that we can look at here in the Old Testament. Just because it's fun and interesting, I think you get the idea. But another strange law found in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 11 says, do not wear clothes of wool and linen woven together. And then we get some further explanation in Leviticus 19:19. It says, keep my decrees. Do not mate different kinds of animals. Do not plant your fields with two kinds of seed. Do not wear clothing woven of two different kinds of material. What? So no polyester and cotton clothes, folks. You can't wear any of those clothing blends where they're blending cotton with other materials or polyester with other materials. So back then, the Jewish people, they would wear only clothes of one type of fiber, like linen or cotton, or one type of fiber only. So it's just one of the rules that they had to follow. And also we see in Exodus 22 verses 2 to 3, it says, if a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, the defender is guilty of bloodshed. So if someone breaks into your home at night and you defend your home and you strike a fatal blow to your intruder, you are not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens anytime during the day and someone breaks into your home during the day and you strike a fatal blow against them, then you are guilty. So just another one of these strange, intricate laws. Leviticus 11, 21 to 22 says, all flying insects that walk on all four legs are to be regarded as unclean by you. There are, however, some flying insects that walk on all fours that you may eat. Those that have jointed legs for hopping on the ground. Of these you may eat any kind of locust or katydid or cricket or grasshopper. So folks, if you ever run into any grasshoppers or katydids or crickets or locusts, have at it. Have at it. So you can eat grasshoppers but not beetles. Sorry if you're a beetle lover. So there are many of these interesting rules in the Bible and the Old Testament that Jewish people followed and still follow to this day. Many of the Hasidic Jews, they still follow these very strictly. And so it's a very complex culture, and expecting these new Gentile Christians to convert, to follow all these rules and abide by the Jewish law, it would have been nearly impossible for them to do, because it's deeply ingrained in their culture and their history, and it would just really be hard to be something that you just jump right into. So Jews who grew up in that culture, for them it would have been easier. And so the question that Paul is dealing with in our text is whether or not the Gentiles need to worry about the Jewish law of the Old Testament. And subsequently, we can ask that same question today. Do we need to worry about the Jewish law of the Old Testament? Do we need to stop eating shellfish? Well, I'll let you know a little secret here. The answer is no. You don't need to stop eating crabs and lobster and shrimp and oysters, and I love it all. I'm not going to stop eating it. And so in Matthew chapter 5:17, though, Jesus says, do not think I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. The reason that Jesus made that statement is because people were accusing him of throwing the law out, of throwing the Old Testament Jewish law out, because he wasn't practicing some of those really strict tenets, that some of the ones that I just read you, for example. Jesus, there's the situation where there's this person who's in need of healing, and it's on the Sabbath. Well, you're not supposed to do work on the Sabbath, according to the Old Testament. And according to definitions of Jewish leaders at the time, if you healed somebody, if you did kind of physician work on the Sabbath, you were guilty of breaking the Sabbath. But Jesus healed this person on the Sabbath. And so the Pharisees are like, Jesus, you're a sinner. You were healing someone on the Sabbath. And another situation where Jesus and his disciples, they were walking through a field to their next destination. And there were wheat, there was wheat in the field, or some kind of grain, barley, I don't know what kind of grain. And they were plucking the heads of grain, and they were eating the heads of grain for some sustenance as they were traveling to their next destination. Well, the Pharisees were watching, and they saw them doing that. and it was on the Sabbath. And so once again, they accused them of doing work on the Sabbath and said, you're breaking God's law. And well, Jesus says, you guys are getting this all wrong. You're being legalistic about all of this. The reason for the law of the Old Testament wasn't just for the sake of following laws. These aren't just random rules that we find here. They're there for a reason. The reason behind the law is for us to be able to best worship God, best love one another, and to protect one another. And so, for many of these laws in the Old Testament, there's a very good reason behind the law that either protects people from danger or it helps situations of conflict, cultural conflict with their neighbors and their societies. There are multiple different reasons why these laws might have existed. I don't know why you can't eat beetles, but you can eat grasshoppers. I don't know the reason behind that law in the Old Testament, but there was likely a very good reason behind that particular law that when explained, we would be like, oh, okay, that's why they had that law back then. Similar to the explanation for the reason that you couldn't eat shellfish. You could eat fish with scales and fins, but you couldn't eat shellfish. Well, the reason that you could eat fish and not shellfish is because fish was much safer, a lot less prone to getting disease from fish than shellfish. And so there was a good reason behind that law that may not apply to us today. And so there were all these good reasons behind the laws. Jesus said, basically, you've forgotten the reason behind the law. You're just practicing, this is legalism. You're just practicing these laws for the sake of looking good and practicing the law. You don't even know why you're doing it. You don't even know why you're refraining from eating shellfish. You've forgotten the reason. And Jesus goes on to talk about this a little bit more in depth, and it's also hashed out more by Paul and his other letters that he writes. The reason behind the law is that we can love one another and serve one another. And in fact, it's said in the scriptures that all the laws and the prophets are summed up in one commandment: to love God and love your neighbors. That one commandment sums up all the law and the prophets. That's the reason behind it all. So we got to get back to the reason behind the rules and the laws. That's what's most important. Not following so strictly these really these guidelines that we see here in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Exodus. So I think that we too struggle with this in our own ways. Nowadays we judge one another, and very clearly here in our text, Paul is speaking out against judging one another. Because the Jews were judging the Gentiles for breaking the Jewish law. And then, it's this back and forth bickering and looking at, you'd be at a dinner in your community with your fellow church folks, and you'd have the Jews, they'd be sitting over here, and they'd be eating their kosher food. Then you'd have the Gentiles over here eating their food, and they'd be judging each other, making fun of one another for what they're eating, that kind of stuff. And so you had those kinds of cultural tensions between Christians who are all striving to be disciples of Jesus Christ, but had different ideas about these some of these religious things. And I really like Paul and how he's a little facetious, he's a little sarcastic here in this text. For example, in verse 5, he says, "Some judge one day to be better than another, while others judge all days to be alike. Let all people be fully convinced in their own minds." So he's saying, well, there's the Sabbath, right? Some people believe that Sabbath is a holy day that you must uphold as the best day. And then there's others who judge all days to be alike, and they don't consider one day specifically to be better than the others. And Paul's just like, well, let all people, let all of them be fully convinced in their own minds. In other words, one side is going to have all these arguments for why they're right. The other side is going to have all these arguments for why they are right. And they're both probably wrong in the end. So Paul's just kind of giving up, and he's like, oh, let them all be convinced in their own minds. But really, that getting back to us and us striving to be disciples today, we have to be really careful about judging one another. And that's what Paul is getting at here, that we need to be accepting of people from different backgrounds and histories. We need to recognize that we're all in this together. We're all sinners. We're all broken people who have made mistakes in our past. We've done harm to one another. We sin in our own ways. We're probably sinning in ways that we don't even know that we're sinning. We're ignorant of so much of our sin. And so when we look at other people and we focus on particular sins as being greater than other sins, and we begin to look down on some folks because of their lifestyle, and we're not looking inwardly at our own mistakes, that's a problem. In fact, Jesus says that we're not to judge. That he says, why don't you pay attention to the log that's in your own eye before you go pointing out the splinters in the eyes of your neighbors? And so that rings true to us too today, that we need to be really careful with how we treat one another. We need to strive to live in harmony. We need to recognize that each of us comes from different backgrounds and cultures. And we were raised differently from one another. We have different political beliefs. We have our religious beliefs, even though we are, at least here, I'm in a Methodist church, so many people are Methodist. Some have come into the Methodist church. They've been Lutheran in their past, or Catholic, or so we have all of these different backgrounds and histories, and we need to be really careful about how we judge one another, and we need to be careful to uphold unity above all else. That needs to be one of our primary goals. What are the things that we agree on? What are the things that are most important to us? How can we be united in common purpose to serve our community, to love people, to be witnesses for Jesus Christ? Those are the things that are most important in our ministry here, not to get bogged down in these legalistic issues that were bogging down the church, the early church. That it was frustrating to Paul because it was really hampering their ministry, because they were getting wrapped up in all these conflicts, these little conflicts over little things that didn't really matter much to God. What God cared about was seeing people hear the gospel and seeing people respond to the gospel. The good news that Jesus Christ came and died for us and for all people, that we might be saved, that we might be forgiven of our sins. And that's at the heart of the issue here too, is all these laws of the Old Testament, all of the sacrificial laws and everything, they were there to provide restitution for people to God. So we're sinners, right? Well, because of our sin, we needed forgiveness from God. And so sacrifice and restitution was the way that people in the Old Testament were forgiven. Whereas now we have Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for us, who died for all of our sin, the perfect sacrifice. There no longer needs to be such restitution. We no longer have to provide sacrifices to God or follow these really strict codes and religious laws to make sure that we're perfect in every way, because we have a God who came to this earth in the form of a human being to die for us, to love us, to serve us, providing that restitution and providing a way for us to experience forgiveness. And that's the good news of the gospel, and that's what Christ is most concerned about. And that's what Paul is subsequently most concerned about too. He wants the gospel to spread across the globe, to spread across all the different cultures and all the different people. And that can't happen if they're getting bogged down with all these legalistic issues. And I fear that that's happening today. We're in the life of our church, we're getting bogged down with all these little legalistic issues, these items in the life of the church that take our attention away from the gospel. And so we need to be careful about that and focus on our common purpose and our common goals, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that should be such a uniting force that all of these other differences among us, our different political beliefs, some of our different religious beliefs, that those shouldn't prevent us from being active in our primary purpose to go and make disciples of Jesus Christ. And that's what's happening, though. You know, here in the United Methodist Church, we're suffering the possibility of a split. We're suffering all these problems within our church because single issues are dividing us so much. Well, in our text today, we're seeing a single issue that's dividing the church. Paul doesn't like it. Paul doesn't like it when these single issues, yes, one side might be right and one side might be wrong. But Paul doesn't want that to be at the heart of the church. What Paul wants the church to care about is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news, the one thing that unites us all together, the one thing that could bring Jews and Gentiles together to the table, despite all their cultural and religious differences. So I want to encourage you to think about that too this week. What are some of the little things that are bogging down our ministry and keeping us from being effective in proclaiming the good news of God's love, proclaiming the good news of the gospel, and bringing Christ to our community? What are the things that are bogging us down and preventing us and making us ineffective in our ministry? And what are the personal things that we're clinging to that are causing us to judge others when we should be seeking ways that we can be together in ministry? So those are my challenges for you this week. I hope this Bible reflection was interesting for you. For me, it's always fun to kind of look back at some of those Jewish laws of the Old Testament, and it's fun, and I enjoy being here together with you to reflect on the scriptures and to think about this stuff more deeply, because it challenges me every time I think about it too, and I hope it challenges you as well. So God bless you. I hope you do have a wonderful week, and I will be back here next Wednesday at noontime to join with you in another Bible reflection. This week, remember, church will be online. We had a wonderful in-person worship service this past Sunday, our first in-person worship service in 6 months. And it was such a joy. The energy was awesome. But don't worry, I totally understand all of those who do not feel comfortable coming back to church yet. It's still there's risk when we come back to church like this, and so I want those of you to know who aren't able to come back yet to know that I support you, and we'll continue to have hopefully quality online worship for you as well, so that you can continue worshiping safely from home. And I hope that you continue to enjoy the worship services. Like I said, this week will be an online worship service only. We will be back in person the first Sunday in October. Well, God bless you. As I said before, have a wonderful week, and I'll see you soon.